Welcome into the Daily Wolves podcast. I'm your host, Evan, and I'm here with a special guest today. We got Will coming on from covers the Hornets over there, and we're actually playing the Hornets tonight. The Minnesota Timberwolves and Hornets are facing at 6 p.m. Central Time tonight. That is going to be tipping off from Carolina over there. And then we also have Andrew joining as always. It's good to have you on, Andrew. Will, obviously, first-time guest. Where can they find you on social media to start off with, and who do you write for?
Yeah. Hey, thanks guys for having me. So social media, you want to go on Twitter at Will Eudy. We'll put the spelling of it somewhere. And then, so I write full time for FanSided. I'm an NBA staff writer. So kind of covering the whole league, but definitely have a big emphasis on Timberwolves for the last couple of years. So I'd like to think I'm pretty tapped in with the team. Like you said, obviously not there in Minnesota with you guys. Did make it out to cover a game in January. So been up there, seen the place. And yeah, other than that, I'm usually down here at Spectrum Center doing the Hornets and doing that whole thing. So yeah, no, excited to be here with you guys.
Hey, we're excited to have you on as well. We're excited to talk about, the game tonight, different players, matchups, everything like that. It's good to get an outside perspective always on our team. It's a good time to get his perspective on your team from us as well. That's why we love socializing with somebody in a different organization. Andrew, obviously, you're on as well. How are you doing today, man?
Good, man. Julius Randle piece is dropping in 20 minutes as of recording, so go check it out on Zone Coverage. But other than that, it's the grind. Back-to-backs.
Back-to-backs for sure, and it doesn't help with that snow that everybody's trying to even get out their driveway right now. Hopefully we're giving you a podcast listen today to kind of forget about the snow for a little bit and get you to that game tonight. Obviously, like I said, 6 p.m. tip-off. And guys, it's a fun matchup always when the Timberwolves and the Hornets play, because you got two players who I think are so exciting. They're the future of the league. They're the players that were in the draft together. That's LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards. Kind of going into the game tonight, Will, what are you looking for in the game from the Hornets side that kind of, because I know they haven't always, built around LaMelo the best or had the best year, but, the Hornets still have a ton of young talent. So I think if you're an NBA fan, what should the fans listening right now look to be watching tonight from the Hornets perspective that maybe we don't always see from the Timberwolves side?
Yeah, I think with this matchup, it's definitely going to come down a lot to interior play. And Mark Williams, I mean, the knock on him before the trade was man, he's just sometimes he's a turnstile on defense. And, there was times where he didn't look like he was giving the greatest effort. And so obviously that led into, this is obviously a big reason why they made the trade. But we know how that whole fiasco went down. He is here in Charlotte again. And then that piece from Mike Scotto drops where it's, all these Hornets guys are potential trade pieces this summer or in the future and all that. But yeah, getting back to the matchup, I would say the interior play, against Randall, Naz Reid, and for those kind of guys, that's going to be big for sure. And then who doesn't love LaMelo versus Anthony Edwards, right? I mean, we haven't always over the last 4 or 5 seasons, injuries, mostly probably on LaMelo's part, but yeah, I mean, up until the November matchup at Target Center, it was actually a crazy stat where when LaMelo and Anthony Edwards both played in that matchup, I believe the Hornets were 6-2. And so it was just one of those things where it's hey, is there some pride coming into this matchup where it's yeah, I was drafted 2 spots behind you, but I'm going to show you that I'm on your level, that kind of thing. So it's always a fun matchup, man.
I think the interior, what you spoke of, is huge for tonight. Mark Williams is a guy who can affect the game, who's have these monster games when he stays healthy. I think it's the biggest problem with him right now, is staying healthy in the NBA. The trade kind of goes down for the Lakers. Obviously, we all know Mark Williams was going to play there. The Lakers took a look at his medical stuff. The trade doesn't happen. Andrew, they're playing him tonight. How do they start or stop Mark Williams? Because I'm not sure. From what I've seen since Gobert's been out, it looks like Minnesota's getting scored on in the paint by will, kind of. Because last night, again, I noticed them, the team that we were playing last night getting it downhill and in the paint against the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Well, and Will, is Nurkic playing, or is he out?
He should be playing. I'll double check the
Okay.
injury report.
Okay. Mark Williams and Nurkic both just kind of score at will against the Wolves.
Yeah.
I mean, Nurkic, for any team he's played on, takes advantage of the Wolves. Unfortunately, there's not really a defensive like interior right now for the Wolves. Naz Reid has been like improving, but he's still undersized and kind of undermanned. Julius Randle has been great since January 1st, but he's 6'8" forward. And outside of that, Luka Garza isn't even getting playing time because of how he performed defensively. So we kind of just have to outscore them in the paint. I mean, I think it's safe to assume that tonight Mark Williams is probably going to score 20 points. And as long as Nas or Randall matches it, they just got to contain the perimeter. I mean, it's more of containing LaMelo, which, you know, when Charlotte was here earlier this season, I think they forced like 8 turnovers on LaMelo, and they did a great job of just making his life miserable between Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards. That's probably going to be their big goal. And especially after last night when Quentin Grimes popped off for 20 points in the first quarter, they really got to, or not first quarter, the first half, they really got to just make sure LaMelo is in check more than anything else, because I think they'll be able to at least match the scoring that Mark or Nurkic puts up.
Yeah, I feel like last night Quentin just looked like the second coming of Jesus Christ against us for some reason, which was insane. Then again, he had like 40-something points a couple games ago as well. LaMelo Ball, I don't know if you can honestly slow him down too much. He's just one of those star-level players like Anthony Edwards. Kind of like sometimes when you face Steph Curry, if you can just hold Curry to like 22, 23, that's a win, right? Because we all know who Curry is and what he averages. I feel kind of like LaMelo and Ant are in that stratosphere. So yeah, if you're the Timberwolves, holding LaMelo down into the lower 20s would definitely be, ideal, maybe 21, 22, but it's definitely a tough task when he averaged about 30 points a game for most of the year, 26.1 points per game right now, 5.2 rebounds, 7 assists for LaMelo Ball, having a fantastic year. And he looks, honestly, like the way he plays, I just love watching LaMelo's game because he looks like he's playing like pickup basketball on a court. Like sometimes he just does random pull-up shots. And I think, like, Will, you obviously know the best. He just has this fun game, fun flair to him. And kind of like Anthony Edwards, I think like they just have that joy of hooping. Like they just, at the end of the day, they're pure hoopers. They just want to go have fun. They both have these post-game interviews where they kind of say what they want to say. And they honestly have a lot of connections in weird ways, personality-wise. So LaMelo's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. I'm a big fan of him. I wish I could see like him and Ant just playing a team one time just to see what would happen. That'd be so fun. I can imagine they'd be just throwing lobs to Anthony Edwards for like windmill posterizer dunks. It'd be incredible, man. Well, let's kind of take it back, guys, to the draft when obviously LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, they're in the draft together. There's a lot of talk about LaMelo Ball going number 1 overall. He was a massive prospect in high school, having that big game where he scored all that points. Well, what did you see in the NBA draft back when they were there? And who did you have personally on your draft board as the number 1 pick?
Yeah, I think back to 2020, and I was more of an Anthony Edwards guy. I thought he was the right pick at 1 at the time. I think like part of it at the time, because LaMelo goes 3, James Wiseman goes 2. Part of it was the previous NCAA season. There wasn't a March Madness, right? So we didn't get to see Ant play in March Madness, and that definitely affected like the way some people saw him. But also another big part of it was LaMelo, right? He doesn't play in college at all. He goes international. LeVar sends him to go play in Lithuania, I think it was, and all that. But like, of course, people knew him even if he wasn't playing in college, just because of Ball in the family. Like everybody knew LeVar and Jello and Lonzo and all that. So it was like one of those situations where it was like, okay, is the pop culture influencing how we view him, or is he just that great of a player? No, I love both guys in the draft, but at the time I was definitely an Ant guy. And it was crazy to me that people were coming and saying things like, does Anthony Edwards even like basketball? Because he was a football guy growing up. I'm like, this is the craziest possible take.
Yeah, I think, what's weird is I actually had LaMelo Ball as my number 1 over Anthony Edwards coming to the Timberwolves at the time. I think we still had D'Angelo Russell, but I just saw this like star that was just, to me, LaMelo was always he was going to be a star, like 100%. I felt that way. Anthony, I always had as my highest ceiling player. I think when we did our initial draft draft prospect looks, yeah, I had Anthony Edwards as the highest upside, highest ceiling, but I thought it was down the road, years down the road. I thought I had question marks on his 3-point shooting, which looks hilarious now. I think considering he's going to end this year leading the NBA potentially. But Andrew, where did you have Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball on your draft board?
I was a big Ant guy too. And for
Okay.
me, it was, I went on some draft stuff before this season, and like the two guys I was highest on were like Steven Castle and Rob Dillingham, because they just have that like mean streak to them where like Rob will get pissed, and even in Kentucky would go off. Castle didn't back down from anyone, and I saw that a lot in Ant, where when he was at Georgia, he didn't have a very good team, and he just would go into this mode in some games where it was, we still see it here today. I mean, my favorite memory of Ant, like in his young career, is there was a game last season against Memphis where Jaren Jackson Jr. was going off on Ant, and Ant just decided, I'm playing center. Everyone get out of the way. Forced 2 turnovers, drew 2 fouls, scored like 12 straight points, and the game was over. And like, that was what I saw from him in college, of like, oh, if this guy figures it out, he's going to wreck the league. I think it's interesting because I do think there was like a consensus that like LaMelo Ball probably would fit better with Towns, just from like a pick and roll standpoint, pick and pop standpoint. But for me, it was like this Wolves franchise has been so like down forever. Do we really need to add like LeVar Ball and LaMelo Ball and all of that drama to a franchise that's not great? And then like 3 months later, Gerson Rosas got fired for like having a intimate relationship with a staff member, and kind of the entire thing blew up. And all I thought when that happened was like, thank God LeVar Ball isn't here. So I think they made the right choice at the time.
I feel like either way, you're getting a star level talent. Obviously, LaMelo and Ant, they're cornerstone pieces of the organization. Kind of, if I guess, Will, like you're looking at both players right now, who's helping their team more, would you say, between Anthony Edwards this year and LaMelo Ball?
Consistency always plays a big part when you talk about basketball at any level, right? Obviously. So I think I would have to say Ant, just from the pure perspective of health. And I mean, LaMelo has been more healthy this year. He's played like a good bit more games than he's has the last 2 seasons. But I mean, unfortunately, injuries are still a big part of the equation when you talk about just his time as a professional player in general. And I mean, Ant, yeah, he's getting suspended because he can't control his mouth. But he's not missing extended stretches because he has trouble with his ankles, which is unfortunately the story for LaMelo. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case for forever. But unfortunately, it is a trend that we have to acknowledge for the first 5 seasons of his career. If you look at his first season, 2020, 2021, he played 51 games. His second season was actually by far his most healthy season, 75 games. But then the last 3 seasons, he's played 96 games combined. I believe he's up to 38 now this season, which is the most of a single season in the last 3. And yeah, again, like consistency matters, right? So he is an all-star level talent without a doubt when he's out there. Like he definitely should have made the all-star team. But also, like, what effect does that have on you when you're going out, okay, you're playing, scoring 30 points a game for a 12-game stretch, but then you're out for 10 more games, whatever it is, right? So I think you have to say Ant right now is the overall more impactful player, even if their talent levels from like an individual standpoint is somewhat comparable.
You guys have obviously you have Brandon Miller as well. That's an exciting young talent, I think, of the NBA. I think a lot of people don't even know, listening, that Brandon Miller has been putting up a ton of points. I mean, he was averaging like 21 points, 20 points a game before he kind of got hurt this year. For fans listening right now who aren't as familiar with Brandon Miller's game, what does he bring to the basketball court? What has he done so far for the Hornets? And what do you want fans to know about a young talent like Brandon Miller?
Man, he's incredible. He's a 3-level
Mhm.
scorer, and he's just got that game where, he's compared himself to Paul George. I mean, since before he entered the league, like before his rookie season, he goes on Podcast P and says, you're my GOAT, you're my favorite player of all time. And like, I've definitely taken notes from you for like a long time. And I think we see that with a lot of these young wing guys. Like they play a very similar style. And yeah, I mean, Brandon, unbelievable, like crazy talent, athleticism, shooting power, like he does it all, and he's going to be a great like piece for this franchise moving forward. The wrist back in January is what sidelined him for the rest of the season, so he's going to miss like half of his second season, so that's not great. But I think what we saw for like the first half of his sophomore year, if you can call it that,
Mhm.
was a lot of it was adjusting to this new system with Charles Lee and kind of playing a little bit different style basketball, where his rookie year he definitely leaned into the mid-range a lot. And it seemed like Charles Lee kind of wanted to really just go towards a more three-point heavy offense, which honestly it worked. But yeah, it was kind of a different change for him. But overall, like it doesn't really matter where you put a guy like that. He's going to be great. And I think they'll continue to grow. And yeah, like he's definitely one or two or three most important player in terms of like this young core and what the Hornets are trying to build going forward.
Yeah, he's awesome. I really like his game. I think again, a lot of people I talk to that I run into just around are just not familiar with his game for some reason, which I don't know why. He was the number 3 overall pick. He was a big name in that draft. Um, I don't know. I guess had that disappointing summer league initially when he first came in, but he's an exciting player. Now you have him, you have LaMelo. Yeah, it's fun when you have an NBA, like a team that's young. I think that's why the Timberwolves fans right now are having so much joy watching the Wolves, maybe not to start the season this year, but over the last couple, 3 weeks here or so. And Andrew, that's because we also have the young talent in Minnesota. Obviously, Jalen Clark, Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, who you spoke of. I think, Will, you're going to be doing something with Rob Dillingham, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Why should Minnesota be excited about the youth, Andrew?
I mean, the youth is one, it's cheap contracts, which let's just be honest, that's probably the most important thing is that Rob
Mhm.
Dillingham's making $6 million a year for the next 4 years. Shannon's making 2.5, and Clark, I think, is making 2 this year and next year. Like when you have those cheap contracts for audio or for visual, there's a little quote for you. But those cheap contracts, they allow you to swing big on other players. So like when we're talking about a Kevin Durant trade this summer,
Mhm.
that's why that can happen, because you got 4 guys making relatively no money. If a year and a half from now they decide that they want to package some of these young guys and do a 3-for-1 trade, it allows you to do that as well. I think looking forward though, like it's fun to watch a team grow together. And for Timberwolves fans, we kind of got robbed of that when it was Levine, Wiggins, and Towns. They
Mhm.
ended up trading Levine for Jimmy Butler, and we never really got to see that through. And this is kind of another chance where we get to see like Jaden, Nas, Ant, Shannon, Rob, like we get a chance to watch these kids grow up into their full potential. And man, it's just fun to watch them run too, because
Oh
like
yeah.
there's a difference between a 28-year-old effort in the NBA and a 22-year-old's effort in the NBA. Will, I did want to point out you got like a trio of Timberwolves on the Hornets as well. Are we going to see any of them tonight? Is Okogie, Moore, or Taj Gibson going to get minutes?
So Taj Gibson, I believe, is probable. I think he's got the team illness that's going around. Okogie is not playing, and I'm sorry. Remind me of who was the third one?
Wendell Moore Jr.,
Yes, of
Duke
course.
alum.
He will be available. I'm not sure if he'll be in the lineup.
So I shouldn't wear my number 67 Taj Gibson jersey out tonight. Like that would just be an air of caution.
I will say I interviewed Taj a few weeks ago, and he's just a great guy to be around. Like I think
Oh yeah.
that having him on that team, like it's been great in terms of like just having a guy in the locker room who's truly just that all-encompassing vet leader that takes those guys under his wing and says, hey, I've been doing this for whatever, 17, 18 years. Like basically just follow my lead, right? Like what he told me
Uh-huh.
was that he works this guy's work ethic is insane. He told me he runs 2 miles after every single game. And I'm like, what kind of like examples is that set when this guy is doing that, right? I think
Holy
he's
crap.
great.
Dang, that's crazy. I didn't even know that. We loved having Taj in Minnesota. I think like, any Timberwolves fan loves what he did here. He brought a lot of culture with the Jimmy Butler at the time. He was one of the reasons we got back to the playoffs when we hadn't been there in the drought. He had a big play on Nikola Jokic at the very end of that, game 163 there to get the Timberwolves into the playoffs. Will, I just wanted to ask you, since you covered the Hornets, you're an outside perspective. Obviously, you know stuff. You follow NBA, you follow the Timberwolves. You saw them last year have playoff success. They've obviously struggled a bit, ups and downs this year. Sometimes they look phenomenal against good teams like maybe the Celtics. Sometimes they look horrible and they'll lose games to the Washington Wizards, which we've seen this year as well. What, from an outside perspective, I just got to hear, because I'm sure fans want to hear it too, but I love to hear from an outside perspective. Why do you think Minnesota has struggled so much this year? Obviously, they make the Karl Anthony Towns trade, which is a huge trade. What are your thoughts on everything, and kind of from an outside perspective on the Wolves season and why they might have, not been as hot of a team, I guess you could say, as last year?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I mean, like you
Mhm.
said, I think the Cat trade is like definitely precedes any conversation when you talk about the Wolves this year, unfortunately. Because I mean, Cat was just talking about it with D'Lo a few days ago on his podcast, where he said it was legit like 2 days before training camp, and like they were ready for media day and all of that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I get why Tim Conley did it, but at the same time, like you have to understand that's going to change everything when it comes to your vision for the team, because we went through the whole summer basically saying, yeah, they're going to run it back with this team that went to the Western Conference Finals minus like Kyle Anderson. And
Mhm.
so it changed the expectations immediately. So I think everybody has said it at this point, like this team is much more like the Wolves team from 2 years ago when it was Rudy
Mhm.
Gobert's first year and they were like figuring out, okay, how does this work with Cat? And then, okay, midseason we have Mike Conley. So now we have a guy who knows how to play with Rudy and some things start working. But then we draw the Denver Nuggets in round one of the playoffs and it kind of falls apart. So my thought is like, yeah, like you said, okay, they can lose to the Washington Wizards at home. They can go out and beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2 games out of 3. I mean, it's an anomaly. Um, my thought is that, yeah, like they're figuring things out, and maybe sometimes they just get that extra motivation. Maybe it's just a motivation thing. I don't really know, right? But I do think that it's one of those things where this team can remain a dangerous team because we've seen it again. They'll beat the Bostons, they'll beat the Denvers, they'll beat the OKCs, and they have the capacity to play up or down. So
Mhm.
I still think there's hope for them when it comes to the playoffs for sure. Like I wouldn't say that I believe in this team like I believe in the 23-24 team because they were just so dominant for the whole regular season. But
Yeah.
like the talent is there, right? If you look at this Wolves roster, like they still have a very good collection of talent. And so I like where they're at. I don't think that they have, like I said, as great a chance of making a deep run. But I do think that I get it from the Wolves like fan base too. I understand the frustrations, but I just still think that there's a chance for this team to do something.
Where do you have them finishing this year? Because right now they're the 7th seed. They're battling in there for that playoff spot, trying to, claw to get into the playoff spot lock. They want to obviously play in the play-in tournament if possible. The Warriors are right there with them. It's a bloodbath in the West. The Clippers are sitting right there with them. I guess, where do you have them finishing right now, Will?
Yeah, the Clippers have not been great recently. I think my opinion is that they're going to continue to fall. So my guess is that the Wolves, maybe this is a little optimistic, but my guess is they'll finish 6th. And if they
Mm.
finish 6th, they're probably going to draw a few different matchups, right? Denver, maybe,
Yeah.
Lakers, maybe, Memphis, but they've fallen too. Um, I would think around there, right? Like definitely 6, 7 is probably as good a bet as any. And obviously you want to avoid the play in if possible. So 6 would be right, fantastic. I think about that Memphis matchup. I like them. I like them in that. Um,
Mhm.
I'm a little bit more worried about the Lakers. I would
Oh
not
yeah.
feel as good about playing Luka Doncic in round one, especially considering May of 2024. So I think around 6 is going to be my guess as of right now.
Okay, cool. Andrew, I guess I'll toss it to you where you think they're going to finish next as well. You know, I'm wondering if the Rockets might fall because they look like they keep dropping. They're falling even more. They're on a losing streak again. I kind of have them falling up potentially, and Minnesota and the Warriors getting in. What do you think, Andrew?
I am going to echo Will. I think they'll finish 6.
Okay.
The Grizzlies are also 3-7 in their last 10, and they've been just a weird team. They looked like world beaters earlier this season, and now they're kind of showing their cracks. Morant is missing like 1 out of every 3 games. Now that the heat is on, I could see Memphis falling a little bit too. Again, I think the Wolves will probably be the 6th seed, and again, not to just continue to echo Will, but I like their chances against anyone other than the Lakers and OKC. Like if they draw Denver, I don't think they're afraid of Denver. Nas has shown that he can guard Jokic at times. They have enough people to throw at Murray. If they do face the Grizzlies, they have 5 perimeter defenders to just throw at Ja, and Denver or Memphis doesn't. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. is good, but he's traditionally struggled against the Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
And even like if they get the Rockets or Warriors, perimeter defense is not going to be an issue for the Wolves in the playoffs. It's going to be when they have to play Oklahoma City, who can throw, Hartenstein and Chet and J-Dub at them, or when they play the Lakers and they have to deal with LeBron post-ups and Luka post-ups.
100%.
I do think this Wolves team sneaks in, and I think they probably win a round and then unfortunately get bowed out in the second round. But for what this season has been, winning a playoff round and then going into the offseason, I think will be obviously a championship is the goal after you go to the Western Conference Finals. But I think if you look at this season as a whole of how they started, how the injuries they've been dealing with recently, if they throw out a first round win over Denver and then get eliminated by the Lakers, I think you can be pretty happy about the first season after a cat trade ending that way.
Plus, you get that experience for your younger guys. Obviously, going to the playoffs, there's guys like we look at the future of this team, guys who've never really been there, been around that, and that's like Rob Dillingham, the rookies, the young guys. So getting those guys kind of experience, and there's nothing wrong with getting Jade and Nas and the relatively young guys some more experience in the playoffs too, because we saw it last year. They kind of stepped up. That's kind of the first preview that we saw of Jaden McDaniels taking those next steps to where he's at this year. I think Jaden played kind of like how he's been playing this season of late in the playoffs. We saw it against the Mavericks series, especially. So kind of getting them all back, and then it gets you a look at, when we faced, speaking, Will, you talked about the team with Vando and D'Angelo against the Grizzlies and everything. What Minnesota found out against the Grizzlies is that they needed to get, a big center. They found out from that series they needed to make a trade to improve their team, and they went out and they got Gobert, and they became a West Finals team later down the road because of that. So you learn a lot in the playoffs, and you can learn it from as like a GM or organization what the team kind of needs when your weaknesses are full exposed in a 7-game series. So yeah, the playoffs could be beneficial, guys, for numerous reasons. But yeah, it's been awesome having you on, Will. You're going to be doing a piece, I know, with Rob Dillingham today. Where should fans be looking out for that? And what are you doing with Rob before we get going here?
Yeah, so I'll be doing a quick one-on-one interview with him. The Wolves did not shoot around today. I assume that's because they were flying in so late last night from, after the Philly game. So probably be catching him some point before the game today, just have a few quick questions. And I'll be writing up a piece on that. You guys can find that, or anybody listening can find that over on dunkingwithwolves.com. So just going to be talking about kind of his rookie year, and then a little bit of a local connection too, because many people maybe don't know this, but he's actually originally from Hickory, North Carolina, and he played a couple of years of high school up here at Combine Academy, local school up here. So I'll be asking him about that, and just go dunkingwithwolves.com. I'll probably have it up sometime today, tomorrow, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Hey, we appreciate having you guys on. You can find us, guys. We're on, Apple, Spotify for those listening. You can find us by searching the Daily Wolves if you're watching on YouTube. Definitely follow us on there. We're also partnered with Better, the best sports betting app out there. Put in our promo code that is on the screen there if you're watching on YouTube. It is promo code The Daily SPN on Better app, BETR on your app store. And you can bet legally in the state of Minnesota. There's not many apps out there you can do that. So it's legal on most states. I would definitely suggest that because we're hooking you guys up if you put in the Daily SPN promo code with a $200 deposit match on your first deposit. It's that easy. I don't know what you're waiting for, man. Go bet today. Bet on the Charlotte Hornets and Timberwolves game tonight. Make yourself some money, and hopefully the Timberwolves can get that win. Andrew, as always, man, it's been great having you on. Will, thanks again. And as always, guys, go Wolves.
Go Wolves.
Go Wolves.